On behalf of the Canadian or the Confederation of Canadian Unions, thank you very much for taking time out of the day to be with us today to talk on this very important issue. I have made a announcement of your position with the Saskatchewan First Nations Water Association. So I have made an introduction. I'm Kelly Johnson. I'm the national president of the union, and we have 33 members here from all over the country, from BC, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Quebec, Alberta. Do we have Alberta, PI? Yes, can't forget Manitoba. So we're looking forward to your presentation again. Thank you very much for taking the time out to be with us and educate us.
Anyways, about myself, I have a military background in water and wastewater, so that's where I got my start. That was the U.S. Navy. So, and I've been on Carry the Kettle First Nations here and Carry the Kettle ever since I got out of the military. I've actually had quite a few different jobs. I was building manager or building maintenance manager, housing. So I did a lot of renovations there too. Had my own business and furniture. Also, I also worked in a pharmaceutical plant, taking care of the water there too. So a little different background and everything, but it all related somehow relates to what I do today, which is I'm a circuit rider trainer. Basically, I go to all the water plants in our tribal council, which is 11, and I go and I'm the mentor, trainer, repairman for these water plants. So I like I said, I look after these water plants, make sure the operators operate the way they should be, help them with any maintenance repair, educate them to get their certification up to the level of the water plant that they're running. And I also look after one that is provincial, so I do help or volunteer my time for that one. But that also gives me the opportunity to understand the provincial regulations. So, but I also volunteer for 3 charity groups, which you guys already know: the Saskatchewan First Nations Water Association, which I am the president of that. I've been there ever since the beginning, and that's probably now 5 years that we've been organized and moving. We've operated off of volunteers for the last 4 years, and we finally got funded for this last year. I also work where I started was with the Saskatchewan Safe Drinking Water Foundation and team. So on that website, I provide training material for operators, questions and answers. Basically, we work with water plant operators and the students, and just put out training that's available to them on a public website. Also, I also work with the water movement. I'm a board person, a master of that. I've been there since the beginning too, and we just had a conference there in Calgary with our water plant operators. So yeah, the 4-day conference there was pretty awesome. We just come from, so got to meet all the operators there in BC, Alberta, Yukon, and some from Manitoba and Ontario. So it was a great opportunity for us to spread our knowledge, our education for all the promises. So that is kind of what our idea is with the water movement. So, and the Saskatchewan First Nations, that we can work together, and basically, hopefully, that we can kind of put something like association that would be across Canada, that we can all work together and providing training, sharing training, and advocate for operators, because that's the main thing. A lot of our operators in First Nation communities feel very unappreciated. Why is that? Because our leadership never ever really are concerned with what's going on at the water plant. We have our leadership never steps into the water plant, from what I hear, and in the majority of that, just don't get that attention that the operators need, because it also reflects towards their salary, or uh, even just the discipline that needs to be done in these water plants to operate and maintain these water plants. It's when they're not appreciated, I don't think you're going to be doing a very good job, and I'm sure lots of you understand that. So we want to. That's one reason we advocate for the operators, so they can operate and maintain these water plants with with more pride in day-to-day operations. Because as a circuit rider, it gives me an opportunity to see so many different water plants. Like I said, I have 11, but I also working with these associations gives me that opportunity to hear and see and talk with other circuit riders that deal with the same thing day to day, and hearing the stories basically right across Canada, the same thing that we hear today. So that's, like I said, that's why we want to advocate for operators. When you got operators who want to retire, uh, we have a hard time finding backup operators, because a lot of the students either don't understand what the water plant operator does, or when they do find out what the salaries are, it's not very encouraging to want to go to the water plant and work. So that's another, like I said, that's another reason why we want to make that salary increase. And we did a research here in Saskatchewan, and getting the operator salary for First Nations right across Saskatchewan. And because I realized that there was nothing on the website that showed what the difference between operator salary for federal and provincial. And after we did that research, now I see a lot of postings where they're posting that. But with our survey, we found out where our operators here in Saskatchewan are getting $15 to $19 an hour, where non-First Nations are getting $26 an hour. So there's a big comparison there. I know a lot of different our water plants are different in size, different equipment they're operating, but in First Nations, we broke away from the provincial association, because a lot of our operators were complaining when they go to training that training didn't fit what our water plants were, because the equipment was different, the treatment systems were different because they were newer, they had newer technology. So in that having that new technology, like when I first started, there was ROs being introduced, and there was no training for that. That was just something that was new, that was coming out. So talking about that, and mentioned it to the training suppliers that were out there, eventually they started putting on that membrane training for ROs, nanos, and uh, it eventually got out there. The training was introduced, and I don't know, it's just something I see. And then here recently, here in First Nations, we have biological systems. And the thing is, biologicals a little more, it takes a little more training or new technology to understand how that treatment system works. And we've proven that it works here in First Nation communities in Saskatchewan. We worked with a Dr. Hans Peterson to develop that training back in 2002. So today we have over 30 of those type of water plants in First Nation communities, and we've proven that they work. The technology is working here, because a lot of problems that we're dealing with, higher levels of iron, manganese, and ammonia. And ammonia, when you have ammonia in water, you have to use probably up to 40 times as much chlorine when you have problems with ammonia. And before that, we used to have green sands, and Indigenous Service Canada was telling when they don't work, and there's a lot of iron, your water's turning brown, but they wanted us to basically add more chlorine. Well, when you add more chlorine to the system, there is a limit to that. I mean, you who wants to drink lots of chlorine in their water? But to us in our First Nations, we've seen that. That's one reason we developed guidelines, regulations for a lot of specific things like adding too much chlorine. There should be a limit on that. Like I said, that's causing THMs, and we put a limit on it. But like I said, why would Health Canada want to pour more chlorine and cause problems with that? So, like I said, that's just one of the health concerns when it comes to our guidelines and regulations. Some of the things we want to change in our First Nations, because another thing is we want to look at is we want more. We want to we want healthy water. One of the guidelines for the Federation or the federal and provincial guidelines is they said safe water. Well, when they say safe water, again, that's adding chlorine and disinfecting the water. But they're, causing problems if you add too much. And nobody wants to be drinking water that tastes like a swimming pool. So that's why, like I said, there again, that's why we want to change these things to make it more appropriate, more safe, healthier water. And with these biological systems, we add calcium, magnesium to the water. That way, we're making the water, healthier to drink. We're thinking of the health concerns. So, you know, instead of adding sodium hydroxide, which is corrosion control to the pipes, that's not a healthy thing. That's just more or less taking care of the corrosion control within the pipes. So if we don't do that, and we could have issues with acidic water causing problems with lead in pipes coming out. So there we got lead poisoning. So that's another concern that why we're concerned about changing these guidelines and regulations. But those are just some of the things that we need to educate, not just our operators, but also our leaders. Our leadership needs to understand, and that's kind of my point to going back to why we need our leadership to step in the water plants and understand what the operator is dealing with on a daily basis, so they can also make better decisions. Because we've learned in the past, our chiefs of councils who are making these decisions with the engineer on what type of treatment system. We experienced that a lot of these treatment systems in the past didn't work for the type of water here in Saskatchewan, because the water here in Saskatchewan in the ground that we mainly use is unique to the rest of the Canada, because we have a lot of salt deposits in our groundwater. So when we have lots of salt deposits, our treatment systems throughout Canada compared to the rest of Canada is a little more sophisticated. So I said we're treating a lot of more minerals in the water than a lot of the other provinces, which don't have that problem with deep wells. So, and that's said, that just goes back to educating our leadership so we can go back to making sure that they make better decisions. And it kind of goes back to another problem that we have with some of these problems with the operator running the water plant, because when it comes down to budgeting, well, I still get problems with some of our operators that go to when there's a breakdown or they need chemicals. They hear from their managers, well, there's no money. Well, you can't run a water plant without chlorine. You can't run some of these water plants when some of this equipment's broke down. So, we got to find a way to resolve that, make sure that they have money in their budgets. And we just got to find a way to make things better. So, they may, I don't know, we just got to find a better way to make things work for us. So those are just some of the issues that we've been kind of dealing with. How do we change that? How do we make better choices down the road? So that's just some of these things that are why I'm working with these different charity groups. And just like I said, on a daily basis, I'm just trying to find a way to make things work for all of us. And I said just how the operators, we need to bring some pride to themselves. And like I said, if it wasn't for these other charity groups and the Saskatchewan First Nations Water Association, a lot of this stuff would get done. And I really have a good team behind me in doing this work. So we have Rebecca who just come online here. So I don't know if I'll give her a chance to talk about our association and the work that we've been doing there. So if Rebecca wants to take over from here.
Maybe we'll do a couple of questions first.
Sure.
Yeah.
Rebecca's not part of the call yet.
Yeah, Deon, Rebecca's not part of the call yet.
Oh, okay. But yeah, if that's enough information, if not, I could tell you some more. I could talk for days if you want. But
Well, how about we stop here? There might be a few questions from the group. Do we have?
oh yeah.
So
Sorry,
Tom,
I am here.
you are here.
I am here. But
Good
go
to
ahead.
meet you, Rebecca. Good to meet you. So okay. Deon, are you still with us?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So
I ain't
good.
going anywhere. I'll be here.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. Good to hear. Maybe just a couple of questions first for Deon, and then I'll introduce you, Rebecca. How's that? We have some questions for Deon. Tom, you got to come here, Tom. Yeah.
Jan, I'm Tom McLean. I'm with Vice President of Canadian Union Steel Workers.
You might have to speak.
Oh, sorry. With Canadian Union Steel Workers, and it struck me when I heard that you were from Carry the Kettle. A few years back when Chief Elsie was the chief at Carry the Kettle, she helped form the Aboriginal Skilled Workers Association along with Arrow Ashapi, who's another member of Carry the Kettle. And the association is built out of Saskatchewan across the West, and Dale Swampy, who you may know as co-president of Coalition of Chiefs, is also part of Aboriginal Skilled Workers Association. So my question, it isn't so much a question, but if you're looking for support around the wages and conditions that the water treatment operators were getting, that's something the association can help you with, or CUSW can help you with, if there's interest in bringing that group together and trying to make them proud and have them the right terms and conditions for the work they do. So if there's interest, we would love to have a follow-up, and Errol's still up and Carry the Kettle, and we just had our board meeting last week. So if there is some conversations, we're in the community already, so we'd love to help you if we could.
Yeah, I know Errol and Elsie really good, but I never knew they were part of a union. But I didn't really be interested, but I'd still have to see if the rest of our operators and if they would be interested in something like that. So it's like our association it's run by the operators. We're a grassroots organization, so they're the decision makers on what we should be, where we should go, and what we should be doing. And I think Rebecca could probably speak more on that, but no, I'm pretty interested. But like there again, I CLC and Arrow. Well, I'll even go talk to him. But yeah, something to think about.
Deon, it's Kelly Johnson. I have a couple of questions for you too. You talk about educating your leadership.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
How and what have you done, or what have you noticed the differences over, say, a decade? And government funding or government support for the infrastructure and the opportunities for First Nations to get more water treatment plants in place. You say you have 30. What do you feel you need to really be adequate?
You guys heard about the long-term boiled water advisories?
Yes.
Okay. If you remember, the minister or said that he would remove all boiled water advisories. Well, when we found out that he couldn't reach that goal, basically all the work stopped right there. Nothing happened. Our project meetings that were happening once a month stalled. We might have had one meeting in a year, but now that things are starting to get moving, they're still pretty slow. We still got to get that push to get all these communities off boiled water advisories. So, I have one in my community. It's not going there. I'm having lots of trouble trying to keep it. I'm doing band-aid repairs and trying to keep it going, but it's still not producing the water that it should be. That there again, we need the federal INAC to push that. But then we have that fight of keeping it going and moving with them. I mean, we get a lot of stall tactics from the ISCC. So we need to push the federal government to keep pushing these things along. You know, there's still that boiled water. It should be removed for all communities, not just the ones here. But yeah, we still need that push. I said, and still, we've experienced a little bit of movement. I see in the care of these water plants, basically from leadership. But if still, some of our, like I said, our organizations made of grassroots. We also have some of our chiefs in Saskatchewan that were water plant operators. So we do have their backing, but we still need that push from them and the other chiefs on, you know, what we need and what the water plant operators need to do in these water plants. Also, we need to, that salary is probably the biggest hurdle, you know, when it comes to the care and hiring someone at the water plant. Like I said, backup operators, there are some communities, no backup operators. They're hiring people from other communities. You know, it's not an easy thing to be doing right now. So if an operator gets sick, it's they're in a bad situation. They have to find somebody. So, you know, we got to make sure that our youth understand that how vital that these water plants are to their community, and educate them, bring up their math standards, their science standards, that this way they can run these water plants. Because in the last couple of years, the guidelines and regulations or qualifications for these water plants, they've changed. So instead of a grade 10, you have to have a grade 12 now. So in order to run those water plants to be certified to the level that it should be. Not only that, the exams, there are questions that they have are a little more complicated because the exams are made for North America. So they got to understand all the different type of water plants throughout North America. So this is another difficulty and a little bit of a hurdle that we got to manage ourselves. And like I said, there again, we need to educate our youth, and some of our water plant operators need to spend more time. As a circuit rider, I don't get to spend as much time doing the trainings as I do troubleshooting. That's where I spend my majority of my time is troubleshooting. Like I said, with this one water plant, I spend a lot of time there just to keep it up and running. So, but if we, as a circuit rider, I wish there was more circuit riders, and I also wish I would spend more time doing the training on the books.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I appreciate what you're saying about grassroots, because you're probably looking at a whole bunch of people here that come from grassroots themselves, and we appreciate that. And you know, like you said, water is so important to us, right? We believe here water is a human right. It's a necessity, and it should be treated as such. So we're right on board with you on that. We don't want to see any community go without, because we know if our communities go without water, we know how that feels. So yeah, we need to be better. So thank you very much. Any other questions for Deon right now? Yes. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Deon. I'm Bill. Live in Winnipeg. I just want to make a comment. A couple of comments. One is, we hear the government telling us how they're solving this problem. I guess not, eh?
It's slow. But it's slow. Like I said, we were having meetings monthly. Now during the pandemic, it was once a year. Now they're starting to come, but it's maybe once every 2 months. But there's still delays, like designs of those drawings. Like we go from 50% to 90%. It doesn't happen that quick here. And if you see any other project that's provincial, they move twice as fast.
I can well imagine, my wife works as a college instructor. Is there any possibility, for example, just specific training for the biological systems that you operate? Like I understand why somebody would have to go and get a ticket, would have to know all kinds of stuff, but what about like focus training on just for your plants, have you guys considered that kind of approach?
Our Saskatchewan First Nations Water Association developed. I know Rebecca is shaking her head because she knows this what we went through. Yes, we. That's why I was trying to explain. We have biological systems, and yes, we developed that, and they're specific. And we also got all the First Nation operators that do have biological plants together to build on that training. And we're still improving because I still see some things that are missing that aren't done by the supply companies that do some of the on-site training. There's still things that are missing, so we're working to add those in.
Thanks for answering my questions.
Great. Any other questions for Deon? Not at this time. All right. Thank you, Deon. Can you stay on with us?
Oh yeah.
Good. Rebecca, hi. I'm Kelly Johnson. I'm president of the Confederation of Canadian Unions. Welcome.
Thank you.
Little brief history of us. We're independent Canadian unions from all across the country, BC, Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and PEI. I missed PEI last round, so thank you very much for coming on board, and thank you for your work. We look forward to your thoughts and your presentation on this, and your insight as well. And could you introduce yourself to our members, please?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, first, thanks for having us. So I am Rebecca Zagozewski. I am the current executive director for the Saskatchewan First Nations Water Association. I am a settler ally, originally born in the Robinson Huron territory, which is now Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. I only lived there till I was 4, though, and moved to Saskatchewan, where I've lived in Treaty 6 for most of my life. I've been in Saskatoon now for 20-something years. Not gonna fully date myself. Yeah, I've been with the association. Well, I helped found it. And yeah, really, really happy to be here. So I wanted to, we were asked to talk about our association. One of the main things that we have done, as Deon has alluded to, discussed, is create drinkable water regulations and standards. We also have wastewater standards and regulations. And from the development of those came a call for a renewal of the Operators Association. We broadened it, though, to include more water staff and leadership, just to get everyone involved in understanding what it is that we're doing. So I'm going to start by just talking about the association first for a bit, and then we'll get into some of the things that we've done. So we are a grassroots organization, founded, by operators and water staff in Saskatchewan, in First Nations, and we were incorporated in May 2019. Its association is governed by a 12-person board of directors, composed of First Nations water system operators and other First Nation and allied professionals who work in the area of water and health. Currently, I am the sole full-time staff, and we have a communications coordinator who works part-time, and I'm currently recruiting for a program coordinator and administrative assistant. It took a while for us to get funding. We submitted a few proposals to the federal government, to ISC, and was rejected and dragged along until we came up with a niche area that they couldn't say no to. So we envision a future in which every First Nation has full control of their water from source to tap to source. And then every community is able to have confidence in their water. We want to ensure drinkable water on reserve by strengthening community capacity for First Nations to take over the care and control of water. And we use a community-based multiple bottom line preventative approach. So some of our objectives was to, well, first secure federal funding. Check, done that. Formalize executive and board member roles for the governance and financial management of the organization. Established a paid working team. Provide professional networking and communication services for operators and water staff on reserve. And collaborate with First Nations and other organizations for research that's related to water services. And from this, we want to develop training courses, certification programs, and, renewed, better policies. So these courses, programs, and policies are shared with nations and tribal councils at no cost to them. We also want to administer programs for the recruitment and retention of operators and water staff. Deon mentioned this. One of the main things is salary. You have operators that are trained, that the First Nation pays for them to go through 1 year of training, and then they're able to find positions in other communities, well, not usually First Nations communities, sorry, the mining or municipalities that pay better, and then they're gone. So that's a huge barrier. We also want to host an annual conference, trade show, and general meeting, and that'll be coming up sometime in the spring. We want to strengthen partnerships with nations and tribal councils to offer resources to support this training, operations management, and research work. And again, this is, at no cost to them. And we want to attain a charitable status to increase funding opportunities and broaden our opportunities generally, being fully funded by the federal government. They always have that finger on us. So there's a lot of work that we would like to do that they may not approve of. So we want to get that funding so we can be a little bit more free. So just to start out, we did not just get funding, but we got funding, about 9 months ago now. And so we had some bumps along the road, but we want to first and foremost increase our membership. This is going to involve us working with the different nations and trying to find all the operators and water staff and get them on board, so that they can, be part of this professional network and have available training. We are currently developing some training courses, and that is for continuing education units, so that operators can stay, refreshed in their knowledge, and also the nations continue to get funding, because that's based on certified operators. And then host that annual general meeting, conference, and trade show. There's a lot of talk, a lot of work going around drinking water regulations with AFN, so the Assembly of First Nations, and ISC. But we do have these regulations already. And, strengthen our research partnerships. We have a few projects going on, and we will be getting into some operator salary research soon. Right now, we have several courses. There's a few online math courses. This helps with operators when they're preparing for their certification. And then we have an Introduction to Source Water Protection Planning course, and that's done with Dr. Bob Patrick. He's in the Department of Geography at the University of Saskatchewan. Source water protection, we did a live recording of a well decommissioning, which there are a lot of wells all over nations that could be causing contamination. We've got a manganese treatment and troubleshooting course, and then a biofiltration and membrane treatment course, as Deon mentioned. And in development, we have our drinkable water standards. I'll talk a little bit more about this now, because that's more than just the Canadian drinking water quality guidelines. And we're developing a safety course with confined space entry and personal protective equipment. And we are looking at some water testing and calibration of equipment, a course for that as well. So we have a few projects going on. We've partnered with Advanced Municipal Solutions, they're based in Saskatoon, to co-develop a 13-week pilot program that provides pragmatic experiential learning opportunities for women and youth, for those who want to get into water operations as a profession. We have another partnership with Tim Vogel. He is PhD candidate in the College of Engineering at the university. And he is looking at levels of service standards, which you call them loss, and really they are kind of a loss. They're quite backwards. They really don't make sense long term. And then also he's looking at life cycle costing. And these considerations, they often only include like technical performance and economic considerations. And so he's looking at bringing more social and environmental aspects into those decisions, those decision-making tools. So he wants to create a tool to evaluate alternatives for the design and management of drinking water infrastructure and highlight the need for flexibility in resources and approaches. Moving away from that blanket approach for each nation, more based on equity as opposed to quality. And we have another smaller project, a master's candidate, Selena. She's from the School of Public Health at the university. And her primary goal is to apply a strengths-based lens to explore through interviews how water insecurity impacts Indigenous spiritual wellness and overall health. She's not going to be getting into specifics with spiritual practices, but just looking how it overall impacts people. And then, as mentioned, the operator salary research. So ISC, Indigenous Services Canada, actually asked us to do this work. It's kind of funny. They had done a nationwide survey through a contractor, a consultant, to ask operators throughout Canada about their salaries and working conditions and such. And there was a very, very low response rate from Saskatchewan. So they want us to do the work now. In the fall/winter, and this will make more sense after I talk about the drinkable water regulations, but we want to pilot them in different nations to adapt them, strengthen them, as well as the standards to make sure that they're working for First Nations. And then, excuse me, we're wanting to develop a water monitoring and water delivery driver certification program, two separate programs there. So right now, the water monitoring certification, I guess, is it's like a participation pass. There's no real test or anything. We want to include more work into that, get more information into it, really educate them so it's a high quality course. And there's nothing on water delivery driving. This is a problem for people with decentralized systems. The water truck isn't tested often. There's the hose is flapping around. There's just a lot of places for contamination, and we want to work on that and really, in the time being that we're still using decentralized systems, try to get them as safe as we can. So now I can talk about the drinkable water regulations and the wastewater regulations and standards for both of those. So we've adopted, a source to tap to source system. Understanding that, everything that we put into water comes back to us. So we have, an emphasis on source water protection, the drinking water regulations and standards, and then we have wastewater regulations and standards as well. So just a little, you can't really see the writing on that. A poster of the source to tap to source system that we want, that we base our ideas and our regulations on. I won't go into detail with this. It's pretty straightforward. So our development approach. So the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, which is FSIN, which is the regional First Nations government in Saskatchewan, they put mandates in place. And so this was supported by the FSIN chiefs in assembly, the technical advisory group, the health commission, and the environmental health working group. They wanted to establish a group of frontline experts to lead the development of drinking water regulations and standards for drinkable water in nations. And so that's exactly what we did. We acquired funding from Health Canada, kind of under the table, to do this work. And so I facilitated a group of, there was about 10 of us, band leaders, water systems operators, circuit rider trainers, environmental public health officers, and there was some faculty and staff of the U of S, and I was one of those. And they're from, all around Saskatchewan. We wanted to get a representative group from different geographies and nations and professions and backgrounds. So we were able to do that. And this is the group of people that we brought together. We met for a year and then disbanded. It was a short-term group, but a lot of these people are still heavily involved. You see Deon's there. And we'll continue to work with these people to keep moving forward. So we reviewed the current federal protocol and guidance documents and did a lot of research on wise practices used in various jurisdictions across Canada, across, North America. And we had a meeting every month and lots of presentations to keep people informed. We created the 2 draft documents, so drinkable water regulations and then the water quality guidelines. And then following the development of the drinkable water regulations and standards, we developed wastewater regulations and wastewater standards. This was like a contract that I had with FSIN. It involved me just more impromptuvely speaking with people. We didn't have a formal group for this. So our goal is to assist communities with strengthening their capacity from the ground up, using the knowledge from operators and EPHO's leadership that have been working with water for years and decades. So, this is being done by reinforcing First Nations culture and laws and creating governance and policy models through engagement. We've adopted a multiple bottom line financial decision-making process where we prioritize human health, and we are trying to protect ecosystem health as much as possible. We want to create and reinforce social networks, and again, strengthening that human capacity with training and skill development, and really emphasizing properly investing in physical infrastructure. So the approach taken with the regulations and standards documents accounts for and incorporates the reciprocal relationship between humans and water and humans and the earth, which should be one of stewardship and respect. The regulations documents acknowledge First Nations laws, cultures, and customs and makes this the starting point of the documents. They accept and encourage the adoption of Indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing alongside more specific Western-based information. This has been referred to as a tuaptmumk or two-eyed seeing by Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall. And so just a quick example. So using both numerical and narrative descriptions of the lands and waters, rather than just physical chemical tests that only give us results with numbers. So for, say, the wastewater regulations, we have in there that, when you're first testing, when you're first finding a site for effluent release, they'll test the waters, see if there's sensitive species, specifically sensitive fish species. And that's what they base their, is this site good enough or not to dump this effluent? Will it be damaging, too many fish? But we want to include a more narrative assessment of the land, of the waters. What other organisms are in those waters? What other, medicines, plants, animals are frequenting that area? Over time, see what happens. Keep on with that narrative assessment. Are there less medicines now? Are there fewer animals coming through? And you balance that with the physical, numerical understanding of the area. The regulations were created by First Nations in Saskatchewan. They reflect input on local conditions and the realities of operators, circuit rider trainers, and environmental public health officers from our region. They respect First Nation jurisdiction and were created to protect the health and safety of community members, operators, and all other staff involved with water. So while creating the regulations, we noticed several gaps. There's very little attention on decentralized water systems, specifically like on-site systems and distribution. And Saskatchewan, has a lot of those. The true costs of drinking water distribution, for example, were not known until research was conducted with Saskatchewan First Nations on the true costs of decentralized drinking water distribution, comparing that to the piped drinking water distribution. So when you include all of the maintenance costs associated with a truck fill water delivery, so, road maintenance, and it's very heavy on the roads with those large trucks hauling all the water all the time, salaries for drivers, the upkeeps of the vehicles, and then the maintenance and proper sanitation of the cisterns themselves. The pipe distribution, which it's often not supported because of the initial costs. It's very expensive initially, but the pipe system pays for itself in less than 4 years. And that number and the time frame, it doesn't actually include proper monitoring that would be required to ensure that the water within the cisterns are safe. So if you know much about water and chlorination, chlorine disappears within 3-5 days from a contained, from a cistern. Those cisterns are only tested about every 3 months. So if you were to ensure that the water is safe, and there's many cisterns right now that are on just continuous boil water advisories. They've almost just given up on them, in Deon's area. If you were to include the proper testing, staffing, monitoring, reporting, that would actually be required to ensure that those cisterns are safe, the number would be astronomical, and those pipe systems would probably pay for themselves in less than 2 or 3 years. So we're always looking at other research areas to fill in these gaps, to provide information so First Nations can make informed decisions on what is best for their communities. There are multiple organizations with different roles right now that manage both drinking water and wastewater as part of these federal protocol documents which rule this area. And there's confusion, lack of communication, and a lack of accountability between the organizations. And so what we're really pushing for with these regulations and our approach to training and education is having these nations be able to understand and control their water sources and water services on their own, as opposed to always relying and being dependent on the federal government or the province or whatever group it is. And so these regulations promote sovereignty. They coincide with asserting First Nation jurisdiction over water and are consistent with a nation-building approach. These regulations were created with long-term sustainability and cost-effectiveness in mind. The Healthy Water Working Group saw that it's better to invest in capital and infrastructure at the start to decrease future operation and maintenance costs. ISC's current policies are often to choose the lowest bidder for capital projects. They also do not fully consider the long-term operation and maintenance costs of systems in their calculations when deciding on specific projects, although there has been some improvement. As a result, communities receive treatment systems that do not maintain their integrity. They're often missing important documents, like standard operating procedures, which should come just right. That shouldn't be even questioned. Safety precautions for chemicals are missing, fire suppression missing. So this ends up costing more money in the long run. The operators often left frustrated as well. And so in these cases, sometimes a lot of chemicals are used to make up for a poor treatment process. The regulations that we created take a life cycle approach for infrastructure and the ecosystem. These documents are based on the idea that all beings, including those microscopic organisms and plants and animals, deserve safe water and a healthy environment. So right now, ISC, so Indigenous Services Canada, only pays for water services, drinking water services, if you have 5 or more connections. There are some communities with 4 connections that have been on a boil water advisory for 19, 20 years because they don't have 5 connections. There's 4. So, we take an equity approach. So it shouldn't matter the number of house connections to have funding for your water. Everyone deserves drinkable water. So, and then I made this reference with regard to wastewater. It doesn't matter that there's not, sensitive fish species in a stream or at-risk animals or plants. All life forms are deserving, of clean water. The project management team process that we've included in our regulations eliminates the low-cost bidding process, and decisions regarding water projects include social, economic, environment, and cultural factors. They also state that the First Nation gets the final say in the projects, with the project management team and the chief and council signing off on these decisions. Sorry, I should back up here. So this project management team, they meet, and it's usually the federal government and engineers and consultants, and they decide what is, if a community needs a treatment system, they decide the type of infrastructure and the type of processes, and often the First Nations who are attending don't necessarily know everything that they may need. And so there's a lot of I don't want to say bullying because I don't want to use that word, but the government pushes for what they want, and it's usually based on that low cost. And often water operators aren't involved in these, and the one person on the ground who knows exactly how the system works isn't involved. It makes no sense. So when we do start to implement these regulations, we're starting with those pilots, the First Nations will decide on how to create their budgets, how to meet these regulations. We prioritize human and ecosystem health. We use the term drinkable water. So that means water that has a pleasant smell, color, and taste and is free from contamination. Water that will not cause short or long-term health issues. Water that meets the requirements of the Saskatchewan drinkable water quality standards that are based on health and science research, and they don't cater to politics and economics. So yeah, these quality standards that we have for the water, drinkable water and the wastewater are based on research. They're not operating with a single economic bottom line. Often decisions may know this, recommendations for parameters for drinking water, for example, are not adopted by provinces because it would cost too much to implement them, even though it would be in the interest of everyone's health. Our goal is to, with these drinkable water standards, is to produce drinkable water with the least amount of treatment chemicals that abide by these strict standards. That means you need a reliable, robust treatment process at the start so that you don't need to continually add extra chemicals and such. The standards that we created adopt 90% of the Canadian drinking water quality guidelines, but there's a few tweaks with, a few parameters. Just as an example, so pesticides, the Saskatchewan First Nations regulations, we follow the EU standards, which assumes harm with any exposure. So each individual, they've been set at 0.1 microgram for individual pesticides and 0.5 for the maximum total of combined. They don't have say 0.1 for, I'm not even going to try to name pesticides, but 0.1 for each specific one. They take it as a cumulative number. So yeah, the Canadian drinking water quality guidelines have individual standards for each element with no combination maximum. So as a result, the total allowable pesticides, it's astronomical, the amount that you would be allowed to have. Not that it would necessarily happen, but and our regulations, as Deon mentioned, has a chlorine maximum of 3.0 milligrams per liter. The Canadian drinking water quality guidelines have no maximum. So as mentioned, this makes sure that you have a proper treatment system in place so you're not dousing with chlorine. We mandated the creation of a taste and odor panel. This was Hans Peterson. He's a huge, well, he was a biologist. He unfortunately passed a few years ago, which was awful. But he, yeah, he put in this taste and odor panel. So that is implemented during the pilot process of the system to ensure that the community members actually like their water, that it's not full of chlorine or some weird taste that they don't like. The Indigenous nations in Saskatchewan believe that water quality standards should be universal and not vary by the location of the water system. The standards for a drinking water system should be the same as standards for a water system in a nation elsewhere in Canada. So in our standards documents, you will not find that the parameters are categorized into health or operational or aesthetic objectives. It's our belief that these are all health related. If the water doesn't taste good, so an aesthetic objective, people aren't going to drink it, and they're going to find something else to drink that is maybe not as healthy. So we also believe the standards for each parameter should be as low as current technology allows. We use this ALACTA term. So we use that instead of as low as reasonably achievable, which is ALERA, because what is considered reasonable is often open to interpretation. The development of the current Canadian guidelines follows technical information, and typically the influence of votes of those who consider political and economic ramifications of the proposed guidelines as opposed to just health standards. And right now we do have a few treatment plants that are meeting our guidelines. And that's because we have some really great biological systems. We really emphasize protecting ecosystem health. So we have these source water protection plans. We have that mandated for each nation. We want them to create these plans that they can ensure that their source water is protected. And our wastewater regulations have strict effluent standards that consider all organisms in the land and the water, as mentioned before. And we've also included water conservation and plumbing standards in the documents. So we base our wastewater quality standards on ecosystem health. We want to use the least amount of treatment process chemicals where, biological processes are preferred, similar to the drinking water. We want to increase retention time or find different products, biologically based products and systems that can really, use nature at its best to make sure that the wastewater is being treated. We also promote a preventative approach at the community level. So that means reducing chemicals flushed into the wastewater system as much as possible, pharmaceuticals, endocrine disrupting chemicals, and other contaminants that are difficult, if not impossible to treat. We're really having, I've really been searching for ways to treat pharmaceuticals and, phosphorus and nitrogen in a biological way, because those are really causing a lot of harm in the water. So, one of the first things that I stated is that the relationship that humans have with water is so important, and we have a responsibility to protect it. We really feel that the regulations can change the way that water is discussed and considered in policy. We found that in previous studies, community members don't always trust their water system operators. We need this relationship to be strong. People need to trust who's in charge of their water, and therefore they can trust their water and then drink, healthy water. So we've included consumer confidence reports that provide an annual summary of the water systems and data in a readable language so that the community members can understand it. Following the creation and sharing of the regulations and standards documents, as I mentioned, this is when the Water Association came about. So we hope that our Water Association can work with communities to implement the regulations and standards, as mentioned, those pilot projects. We focus on strengthening community capacity at the operator, leadership, and other water staff levels. you know, aside from not just throwing money at communities, which has been a pastime of the federal government, we want to really equip them with the ability to take control of their water systems. So we acknowledge the need for different and more training. Specifically, there needs to be First Nations targeted certification and training sessions. A lot of operators will go into larger cities and, you know, they're one of the only First Nations person in that room. They're often feeling uncomfortable, you know, don't want to ask questions. A lot of the material sometimes doesn't relate to their situation. They have different political scenarios and different systems themselves. So we want to create First Nations specific training. And so one of our current projects, the Advanced Municipal Solutions, we're doing that. We want to develop further training that is taught in a longer time frame, is hands-on and on-site to better align with First Nations needs. So we will be conducting conducting research on operator salaries. We'd like to use this information to better inform operator salary ranges and pay scales for First Nations, and also getting more youth involved. The regulations in general give the operator more decision-making tools and education on how to plan for their systems. It also mandates the involvement of the operator in those PMT meetings, those project management team meetings, so that the person who is most involved in the community with the water can make decisions at their end. So I've mentioned, you know, a few elements of this already regarding investing in physical infrastructure, including using a multiple bottom line for project decisions, which equates to using and another way is to ensure that the engineering consultants understand the needs and requests of the community and follow them accordingly. This requires them to listen. There needs to be a life cycle approach for all upgrades and new builds. An emphasis on prolonging the life of the infrastructure requires fully investing in the capital costs so that operation and maintenance costs do not put stress on the operator or the financials of the community. We also emphasize the creation of proper manuals and standard operating procedures for the infrastructure. These are often not included right now to save money in those PMT meeting plans for the actual systems. We have that the operators need to create maintenance management plans, which we're going to help them with and create very, you know, easy to read, easy to follow documents for that, as well as for budgeting. Yeah, really training that operator at the community level. So to understand how First Nations can meet these regulations, we're going to conduct pilots. We have been talking about this for a few years now, to full disclosure, but you know, we didn't have the funding, we didn't have the capacity. We're hopefully going to be there soon to do this. So the purpose will be to determine the capacity gaps and budget requirements to fully implement the regulations across Saskatchewan, while of those nations that come on board that want to do it. It will always be up to those First Nations to decide what they want to do. And we need to create some kind of oversight and governance of this, which you know, we've done the bottom-up approach. We've figured out what it is that nations, you know, need for a high quality water and wastewater, but it's going to be up to leadership to decide how that is implemented fully and governed. So, and yeah, we hope to work with 3 to 5 nations in Saskatchewan, you know, varying by region and system types, to see what we need to do to adapt, the regulations that we have. So yeah, do the current treatment, distribution, monitoring, et cetera, systems meet the drinkable water regulations and standards? Determine what it will cost to fill these gaps. And we've got Tim Vogel, our engineer candidate, he's going to help us out with that. So, and then in the end, each nation will be able to negotiate amounts with the government to implement the changes required. And that is the conclusion of my presentation here. I hope I didn't put you all to sleep. Yeah, so thank you.
I don't have the science background or the technical background but the sense that I got was the problem was huge and immense. But for those that will watch this video in later days, I was wondering if you could give us a description of what life is like every day for those who are under a boil water advisory. What does that mean for, like, I understand that you're trying to solve the problem, but for those that don't know, can you explain what life is like every day under a boiled water advisory so that they can put those pieces together and make that connection for why this problem is so huge and why this infrastructure needs to be put in place?
Well, I can allude to stories that I've heard. But I want to just backtrack really quickly here. So the federal government, and really now it's become this buzzword, this boil water advisory thing, and everyone's focusing on boil water advisories. Well, there's also do not consume advisories. There's also, you know, there's a few other advisories that aren't even looked at. That's not the problem. The boil water advisories are a symptom of the larger issue, right? Which is that lack of capacity, lack of control, lack of understanding at that community level of how to, make this water, lack of financials. So financials is obviously a part of it, to get these systems up to par. Day in the life. So so previous to coming with the Water Association, I had done research with the University of Saskatchewan for like 12 years with different communities. I've talked to over like 200 elders, many many water system operators and water quality monitors, lots of community members. We did kid projects, stressful, where you have to decide between doing a load of laundry or bathing your kid. Often people don't have vehicles, so they're relying on other people to bring them water. If they, I did find though, like I heard a lot of stories about how people with cisterns, if they did run out of water, they would be able to get water, within a day, sometimes for free, sometimes they'd have to pay $20, but the water would be delivered. The cisterns are quite small sometimes, and so you have, 8 people in your house. You're stressed out, like you have to decide between, this or the other thing to do with that water. It creates a lack of trust with that operator, lack of trust with the leaders. Yeah, it's just very emotionally stressful, I would say. But Deon might have a more of an answer to that.
Yeah, just kind of hear these stories, right? There's a lot of community that call us, especially myself. How can we fix those boil water advisories? But could you imagine the water coming out of your tap is brown, and you need to wash clothes or you need to do dishes or whatever here, clean the house with that brown water. You got kids and stuff in the house. So a lot of these people are ending up having to go to the water plant with bottled jugs and going to fill up their water plant. So there's some community members that probably have no cars. Our elders, how are they going to get that bottled water into their house? They're drinking this water. People, struggling to have money for maybe somebody to go get that water. So in some cases, they can't afford to even go to the water plant. So they're just drinking the water straight out of the tap like that and trying to strain or clean it somehow in order to drink it and use it. So those stories go on. I still see it here today in a couple of the communities that I work with. So, that is just, we don't want to see that. Like I said, they've been trying to push the federal government to move along and get all these boil water advisories off. So that's just some of the stories why we see these boil water advisories. And back to the cisterns with Rebecca was talking about, all our cisterns here in Saskatchewan are under a boiled water advisory. We have clay that are around our, so when that clay as you know, most times when the water truck or sewage truck they're driving around those cisterns, there's a lot of ground shifting that goes on. So now these cisterns, they crack, they either crack or they shift, the lids get broken, and when the guys go to clean them, which they find a lot of sand, they find rodents, they even found deer bones in there, and snakes. It's just ridiculous, some of the things they find. Like I said, some of the covers are broken. It, this is, they can't be well maintained. They shouldn't be used at all, because really it's a cement. This cement is really not made to hold drinking water. So those are just some of the issues that we're having to deal with when it comes to boiled water advisories. So yeah, it's a bad situation to have to live. Like I grew up in the city, but when I came here back in 1988, we still had communities that were hauling water from wells. And like I said, I didn't grow up that way, but I wanted to change things.
Thank you, Deon. Thank you, Rebecca, for putting that in perspective for me.
Sir.
No.
I'm really interested in this multiple bottom line. And you go to your funders and you tell them that, yeah, we have a spreadsheet, but we also have something else. Is that how that works?
Well, we haven't quite got to the conversation stage with these funders, but I guess it's just starting with that First Nations understanding of the world, of ecosystem, of how to make better decisions that include social and environmental considerations. Yeah, we don't, those things are still in development.
Super
But
exciting.
it is, it really is. There's going to be a lot of work. I have a social science background, so I don't know all of the specifics of, chemical treatment and all those things. But we use, I'll say use, we work with the people who have this knowledge. And yeah, we've got partnerships with engineers and such, and people who can do this costing to include more social environmental things. Yeah, we're not there yet, but it will be interesting.
Way to go. Congratulations. Don't
Thank you.
hesitate. Thank you.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Deon. Thank you so much. Dawn here. Sorry to be emailing you 50,000 times this morning. Thank you for your presentation. Extremely important work that you're doing. I have a two-part question. Firstly, Deon, you touched on meeting in Calgary. So I'm wondering, what are the benefits of sort of an interprovincial collaboration? Or maybe that's not working. It seems like everybody's working independently, like provincially, they're working independently.
Yes, that's true. And that's one reason we're trying to reach out to other provinces and work things together so we can make a stronger bond and hopefully force water advisories that way to get them, feds to get it off. I think as a team, we could work better. But like I said, each province water is different. Each well is different. So, they have different issues in different communities, different issues in different provinces. So yeah, we want to work together. Basically, even though when it comes to guidelines and regulations, they'll be different, but then we still have a good idea how we can help each other. And I think working together and seeing all the different issues, how things work in different issues, I think we can make each other stronger that way. So yes, and working with you guys, I think there's another opportunity to help us force those guidelines and regulations.
Could you perhaps expand that a little bit more? Like, what are the challenges that are unique, but what are the challenges that are different provincially?
I don't know if I'll give Rebecca a chance to answer that if she'd like.
Sure, thank you. I want to just expand a little bit on what Deon said. So yeah, we had a great time in Calgary. Um, Met a lot of people who have started doing some of this work already. So there is a co-development process, co in those terms, between the Assembly of First Nations and the federal government. And so, they're looking at creating these, national drinking water quality guidelines for First Nations. It's not necessarily going as they planned. Um, but there are organizations, so I don't know if you've heard of the Atlantic Water Authority. They've started it's First Nations. They're fully federally funded. They've been working on creating this authority for the last, 10 plus years. They took a top-down approach. So they started with their governance and political structures, and now they're trying to get communities on board. Um, we did the opposite. So we started from the bottom up, and so we have a lot of, you know, we can work with them. I spoke with the project management project facilitators of that worked with the Atlantic Water Authority, and so we're going to partner up with them. And well, not necessarily up to the board. I thought perhaps we could work with them, see the information that they've can share with us so that we can do that. Um, the challenge, I guess, with a nationwide approach is every jurisdiction is different. The water sources are different. Deon mentioned we have highly mineralized water in groundwater. We have wonderful lakes and rivers for the larger municipalities, larger cities, but the smaller communities, the municipalities are reliant on these deep wells that are often very, very mineralized. So you need higher high-tech systems to deal with that. And then there's different governance approach, different structures, different political policies and everything that every nation will have to decide for themselves how, what they can do. We are here to provide information. We have done a lot of work on these regulations, and we're willing to share them with any community or tribal council or region, and they can take those and adapt them for what they need. It really is like a very, every culture, there's so many First Nations cultures across Canada, so many nations, and they all have different ways of doing things. But the approach that we took is really quite general and broad, with that ecosystem prioritizing human health. It's based on a more general understanding of First Nations culture and ways of knowing the world. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, absolutely. No, that's great. So the second part is, you talked about encouraging the youth and, getting that proper training. And we all know that succession planning is key to all of our organizations. So is there an apprenticeship type program, or is that something that's in the works or being looked at?
We don't have anything as of yet. We have worked with different colleges in the university to go to communities and have little day projects with kids. You make a water filter or those kinds of things. It's something that we want to work on. First and foremost, though, I would say we need to convince the federal government to actually provide funding for that 1 year of training that operators need to become a certified operator. That is like such a barrier. If you don't, and then the salary that comes after that, we need to keep the operators that are here right now. But we want to, there's so much to do. And, we're just getting funded. Well, we just got funded and just trying to create our own capacity here at our level and staff up. And then, yes.
I just wanted to add to that, Rebecca. Nicole, so the Safe Drinking Water Foundation and team there. She's been working with students for quite a while now. So she has some programs in tutoring too, but also with this with the water movement. We've been that's one of our goals there is to educate students, and we did a little experience of making water bottles at our last conference here in Calgary there. So that is one of the things that we're trying to do is, do different things with the students. Also, BC is another group that I'm working with too. So on their board, but also in my tribal council that I work with, we also have an apprenticeship. We're actually sending 3 students to recent graduated students to work with one of the supply companies for a year. So it's more of an apprenticeship. So after a year, there'll be another rotating of another 3 students to work with them and learn. So those are just some of the apprenticeship programs that we got going. So that's not what I'm hoping that we can. These are kind of like the ideas that come out of the Water Association that we're doing is just like I said, with me and Rebecca, we have a lot of things going on. We just can't do all those things right now, but we're in the middle of hiring more staff. So once we get more staff, I think we will have a lot better opportunities, more chances to start doing all those other programs that we need. We still got to get these chiefs on board to get them to understand where we're going, because their direction is a bit different than ours. Theirs is more money generated than what we're trying to do. We think of the environment, how we can protect the environment. They're more thinking about, well, how can we work with these oil and gas companies? And it's just, we gotta, like I said, we just gotta get them to understand what direction, and we're thinking about our people first.
Absolutely. Keep up the fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A few more questions, Cheryl?
Hi there, Rebecca and Deon. Thank you for your presentation. My question is very basic, I'd like to think, and I'm sorry that I don't have the understanding, is why is it necessary for you to create a charity to have water in your communities? Where does your money come from? Like, what is the funding structure and how does it get distributed?
So yeah, we're fully funded right now by the federal government. So, I've been writing proposals for a few years, trying to convince them to give us funding to create this network and do this different work. But it wasn't until we said that we would create training programs and certification programs and give them away for free. So that the federal government would save costs on registration, on travel for these operators to have to get these training courses. So convince them that they would save money by funding us. The reason why we want to get charitable status and get other, funding monies available is so that we can, do different research that the federal government may not necessarily agree with that would change policy, that would in the end cost them more money. But as they could see, it would save them money in the long run. However, we know, 4-year cycle, right, with politics. So it will take some convincing. So that's why we need that outside funding, so we don't have, again, that thumb on us, so that we can do some work to change policy. Another thing, we want to support training. We want to support operators. Maybe it's scholarships. We give funding to students or youth or whoever it is to continue on with their studies to be operators or water staff, or go further, right? Really trying to increase the human capacity of things. There's probably a lot of things that we could spend money on that would support the people. But yeah, the outside funding is more so for that policy that the federal government may not agree with.
I just want to elaborate on that, because I remember like I said, when I first came out to these communities and seeing this, I was only one voice, and the operators weren't really speaking up what was going on. They, like I said, they weren't being listened to. They weren't even involved with the project management teams to even make the choices of the water plant. It was the government that was making the choices for the chiefs and what type of water plant. And we experienced that a lot of time these water plants that were just stuck in there didn't really work for those communities. And those engineering companies would just come in, put that plant in there, and then they're gone. There was no support. So, I just basically trying to advocate for operators. And then there again, I feel like I was all by myself trying to do this. But, me and at first, I didn't even know Rebecca, but we got to know through other, basically through Dr. Hans's work, the biological system, and he brought us together. So, it was this way of communicating and letting other operators know that who we are and what we're trying to do for them. Other organizations seen some of the stuff that I've been doing too, and that's how they got me involved in, like I said, the water movement, the Safe Drinking Water Foundation, now BC's Water Association. And we've been talking with Atlantic Canada and seeing how they're, how different they're doing things. And they're again sharing ideas and what's working, but I still see that we're going to be doing difference. But BC had their own water association at one time, and they had the same approach that we are. And basically, they really see that what we're doing will work. And I think we got a lot of support from all the other provinces that they want to join and try to do what we're trying to do and work together. So I think, it's a wonderful thing to have all these people pushing the federal government for the same thing in the same direction.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for your presentations today. I think everyone here agrees they were very eye-opening. And I wanted to ask, I'm from around Toronto in Ontario, and there is an example of a water advisory there that has made headlines throughout the country, and I'm sure you've heard of it. And the water advisory started, I believe, in now correct me if I'm wrong, you know better than I, started in something like 1997, and it's been going on for 26 years. Am I right when I say that? And yeah, and I just wanted to ask, what is it about that particular community that it's taking so ridiculously long compared to others? Not that the others are, are any, better or worse, but they are short. I mean, what is it about this 26-year advisory that's been going on for so long? And two, if I could just ask quite bluntly, more in a political sense, if you could be king or queen for a day, what would be like the top three things? And I know there's obviously more than just three things to do, but what would be like the top three things that you would do to just end these advisories as fast as possible and provide clean drinking water, which is a basic human right, to every community in Canada? Again, I know there's more than three things, but if you just had to choose three big ones, what would they be?
Queen for a day. I would like that. I would say I have one thing. I would eliminate the need for power and control on part of the federal government, and for them to have an understanding of First Nations way of seeing the world.
Very good.
Just listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my one thing.
For myself, I think it would take more than a day. As you see with the government struggle with these boil water advisories. My idea is to get all these communities off boil water advisories. I know the experience that you guys have in Toronto. It relates and it's lots of common things that are going throughout Canada about these boil water advisories. Since 97, basically, there was more of a push to see what boil water advisories were going on. I know in my community here, At that time, we found arsenic in our wells. We had personal wells at that time. They were just being built. Well, to get away from the arsenic, we go to one centralized water plant, one treatment system for all the communities. So you wouldn't have individual treatment systems because that would be too costly at that time. So when we do go to centralized systems, now you got how you're going to get that water to the house. Well, you got pipe systems that is costly. The digging part is the most costly part of that. But they were putting in cisterns. So when you deliver water from a water plant to a cistern, you're trucking this water. Well, anytime that water leaves the community, there's a chance of getting it contaminated. So I think that may be part of the problem that's going on with that community there in Toronto, but also the lack of education of the treatment systems. There again, they could be part of the chief's decisions on not choosing the right treatment system for those communities, because there again, chiefs are making their decision out of money that they're maybe, I hate to say it, but kickbacks maybe, but like those decision makers that are up there, they're not always thinking of the people first. There again, the type of systems. Then we have with our pipe, if they do have pipe systems, are those pipe systems being designed right? I know in some cases they want to put a holding tank inside the house, and those holding tanks are another cistern. There's another chance of contamination and mold growing inside the house. But there's looking across Canada, there's so many different issues whenever in regards to boil water advisories, different situations throughout Canada. And when it comes to the infrastructure of these communities, sometimes it's a road access into those communities, and we see that in northern Manitoba. There's only ice roads, so they're only be able to get into that community once a year. How do we fly in? There's one community even in southern Manitoba that they're isolated on an island because they had to divert Lake Winnipeg, and now when they diverted that river, there was no access into that community. So now we got to look at other infrastructure. How are we going to get that water into the community, or get parts or stuff into that community to supply any type of repairs to the water plant? We looked at northern Quebec. We looked at the army there that come into that community in the wintertime, and the army was brought in, but they only had that treatment system running for less than an hour. It took 6 months or longer to get any type of water into that community to repair that water plant. So, these are just some of the problems that we experience. We haven't even got into issues with wastewater, because here in Saskatchewan, we have water treatment, or for water treatment systems, we have lagoons. Our neighboring community had mechanical treatment systems, and the experience of those are just some communities don't have enough money to pay their power bills. If they don't have enough money to pay their power bills, now if those systems are a biological system, if they lose heat, now that's a system is if they lose the power and heat, that system has been basically destroyed. And we had that one situation in a very environmentally sensitive area in Nunavut, and that was a bad situation that the government didn't really want to explain that one. So it really wasn't around the news. But those are just some of the situations why we're in boil water advisory. It's going to take more than just the interest of repairing water plants. It may take, like I said, roads, access roads, and what other situations certain communities are. BC is a unique situation, being up in the hills. You would think they would have access to clean, fresh water, being in a glaciered area, but like I said, there again, it's a unique living in those mountainous areas. So how do they fix some of those situations? Like I said, it's different. But if I think, like I said, if I was a king for the day, it would take a lot more than that. So I don't know how to fix anything in one day.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Sir, does anybody else have a question to follow up? Okay, I guess I do. I have one more follow-up question. You alluded to your pilot projects, and they're in Saskatchewan. And why do you determine 3 to 5? Is that because of the geographical areas or just differences? Is each community a different trial based on whatever the deposits or the challenges that you have to do? And could you tell us where the communities are? So maybe in the future we can get back to you and see the progress of what's happening.
I would say that our 3 to 5, choosing that number is just capacity. It's going to take a lot to go into those communities. We have to develop different surveys and different methods of kind of measuring and see our regulations document is 170 pages long. So it's going to take a while. So it's pretty heavy endeavor. And so we want to, the 3 to 5 was to get, one community with a really good water system that is, predominantly meeting all of their standards, and then kind of maybe a mediocre system that, a different system, and then a community that's really struggling to get just more of a diverse, and, from there, adapt the regulations, adapt our processes, our methods, our tools, and then do more pilots. It is a matter of capacity, I would say. And sorry, what was your second question?
Yeah, where the locations, where are your trials?
Well, we haven't secured them. We haven't secured them yet. Again, we really are just getting our organization, grounded here. But we have, several operators within our board that, I'm sure would be willing for us to work with them, work together and get those pilots done. So, trying to do different geographies, different water sources, different treatment types, get that diversity, and then continue to diverse with, more pilots.
Okay, great. And the scale, the size of the communities that these would service?
Yeah, that as well. I'm not sure if that matters too much because that would also coincide with their type of treatment systems as well. But Deon, maybe you answer that one.
Well, that would fit into all our communities. We have communities that are only a population maybe 75 people up to maybe 1,200. It all depends, but it'll all work for each community because each community is on a separate water treatment system. There really isn't any sharing of these communities of these treatment systems. So I think maybe the problem might be with the shared systems that are shared with provincial systems. But there again, I think it shouldn't be a problem. I think everybody would be happy to jump on board because all we're looking at, the health of the community. Like I said, safe and clean drinking water for all. So yeah, we like it there again. We have chiefs. They're bin water plant operators. They understand what we're trying to do and they're on board with what we're going. So I think we do have some communities that are ready to, well, actually, I know they've been ready for us to do these pilots with them. So yeah, we have a good head start. The only problem here is we just don't have the staff right now to, like I said, do as much as we can, but we got plans and I'm sure we can get it done as soon as we get some staffing here.
All right. Is there any questions behind it? No? Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today, enlightening us. Like I said earlier, please keep us up to date as you move forward, and please allow us to continue to be in contact with you as well, and so we can give this board an update from now and then. And thanks for your time this morning. I know that you had a long week in your conferences, and it is, it's early morning, I think, or a little bit earlier there than here. So thank you for getting up and being with us. And we appreciate everything you're doing, and we wish you very well and success.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with our experience and what we have. And hopefully we can work together, and, the more numbers that we have, I think we have a better chance of pushing boil water advisories off. So there again, thank you again.
No, thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us. Have a lovely rest of your meeting.